August 14, 1943. Recklinck-Lürz Airfield, Germany. Oberst Werner Streibe's boots crunched across the concrete apron as he approached the captured American fighter. The twin-boom configuration looked ungainly, almost comical, like someone had taken two separate aircraft and forcibly married them to a central nacelle. Surely the Americans have not committed such an aerodynamic abomination to mass production. The aircraft sat 52 feet wide, its twin Allison V-1710 engines mounted in booms that extended backward from the wings. Between them, a central pod housed the cockpit and, Streibe paused, an unusually short nose section. He walked closer, examining the business end of the fighter. The nose cone was barely 5 feet long. No wing-mounted guns. No synchronized weapons firing through the propeller arc. Just a tight cluster of openings in that abbreviated nose. Streibe knelt, peering into the gun ports. 4 .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns stacked in a square pattern. Below them, a single 20mm Hispano M2 cannon. All 5 weapons aimed perfectly parallel, their barrels separated by mere inches. This changed everything. Every fighter Streibe had flown, every Messerschmitt, every Focke-Wulf, required gun convergence. Wing-mounted weapons were harmonized to intersect at a specific distance, typically 250 to 400 meters. Fire too close or too far from that range, and your rounds scattered uselessly across empty sky. Gunnery was an art of geometry and timing, of closing to the exact range where your bullets would meet. The Americans had eliminated the problem entirely. This aircraft's weapons flew in a concentrated stream from muzzle to target, effective at any range. The cone of fire, Streibe did the mental calculation, would remain lethally dense out to 1,000 meters or more. A pilot didn't need to judge distance, didn't need to maneuver to an optimal firing position. Point the nose, pull the trigger, and everything in front of you died. The technical intelligence report would land on Reichsmarshal Göring's desk within 72 hours. It would explain why German pilots who encountered this aircraft in combat over North Africa and Sicily were radioing back terms of grudging respect and genuine fear. Der Gabelschwanz-Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. The nickname had emerged from the Afrika Korps pilots months earlier, spreading through Luftwaffe squadrons like a contagion. Now, standing before the actual aircraft, Streibe understood why. This was not a fighter hampered by its unusual design. This was a fighter whose unusual design was its greatest weapon. The journey to this revelation had begun 2 years earlier, when the United States Army Air Corps desperately needed a solution to a problem that didn't yet exist in American skies, but was tearing Europe apart. February 11, 1937. The Air Corps issued Circular Proposal X-608, requesting designs for a high-altitude interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet with a range of 1,000 miles. European intelligence suggested future conflicts would demand fighters capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory and engaging hostile aircraft at extreme altitudes, where conventional engines gasped for oxygen. Lockheed's chief engineer, Clarence "Kelly" Johnson, examined the specifications with the cold pragmatism that would define his legendary career. The requirements existed in direct opposition to each other. Speed demanded power, range demanded fuel capacity. Altitude performance required turbosuperchargers. Armament needed weight. The mathematics were brutally simple. Compromise everywhere, or innovate radically. Johnson chose innovation. His team designed the Model 22, featuring twin Allison V-1710 engines mounted in extended booms. This configuration solved multiple problems simultaneously. The engine's turbo-superchargers, which added considerable weight and bulk, fit naturally into the booms. The twin-boom design allowed a short central nacelle that reduced drag. Most critically, It created space for a weapon installation unlike anything in American service. All guns mounted in the nose, firing directly forward with no synchronization gear, no convergence requirements, no dispersion. The prototype XP-38 first flew on January 27, 1939, piloted by Lieutenant Ben Kelsey. The aircraft reached 413 miles per hour during testing, faster than any American fighter in existence. The Air Corps ordered 13 service test YP-38s in April 1939, then placed orders for 673 production aircraft before the United States even entered the war. December 24, 1941. 17 days after Pearl Harbor, P-38s of the 1st Fighter Group flew their first combat patrol over the California coast, hunting for Japanese submarines reported near San Diego. The aircraft performed flawlessly, its twin engines providing redundancy that saved multiple pilots when one engine failed. But the Pacific Theater would not be where the Lightning earned its fearsome reputation. November 19, 1942. Tafarawi Airfield, Algeria. The P-38F model arrived in North Africa as part of Operation Torch. Pilots of the 1st and 14th Fighter Groups, many with fewer than 200 hours in the aircraft, faced Luftwaffe veterans flying Messerschmitt Bf-109Gs and focke-wulf FW-190As. Aircraft flown by men who had survived years of combat over Europe and Russia. The first major engagement came at 14:27 that afternoon. 24 P-38Fs from the 27th Fighter Squadron encountered 32 Bf-109G2s of Jagdgeschwader 53 over the Tunisian coast. The German pilots, seeing the unusual twin-boom configuration for the first time, initially mistook them for twin-engine bombers. Several Luftwaffe pilots later reported assuming the ungainly-looking aircraft would be easy prey. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. The P-38's concentrated firepower proved devastating. First Lieutenant Jack Ilfrey scored 3 confirmed kills, his combat report noting with clinical precision, closed to 300 yards, fired 2-second burst, enemy aircraft disintegrated. The phrase would appear repeatedly in P-38 combat reports. The combination of 4 .50 caliber machine guns, each firing 800 rounds per minute, and one 20mm cannon delivering 650 rounds per minute, created a cone of destruction that could saw a Messerschmitt in half. The 27th Fighter Squadron lost 4 aircraft. Jagdgeschwader 53 lost 11 Bf-109s with 7 pilots killed. The survivors returned to their base near Bizerte with accounts of American fighters that combined the maneuverability of a single-engine design with firepower they had previously associated only with bomber destroyers. German intelligence officers initially dismissed these reports as combat exaggeration. They would not make that mistake again. The P-38's dominance over North Africa established a pattern that would repeat across the Mediterranean theater through 1943. Each engagement added to the aircraft's growing legend and to Luftwaffe pilots' deepening respect. They struck Tunisia in January 1943. The 82nd Fighter Group's P-38Gs, flying escort for B-17 formations attacking Axis supply lines, encountered Bf-109G4s of Jagdgeschwader 77 on January 15 at 1610. The German unit lost 9 aircraft in exchange for 2 P-38s. Luftwaffe after-action reports began noting the American fighters' concentrated nose armament and effectiveness at extended range. They hit Sicily throughout June and July 1943. The 1st Fighter Group, supporting the Allied invasion, achieved kill ratios exceeding 4-to-1 against defending Luftwaffe and Regia Aeronautica fighters. On July 5th, Major William Leverett of the 37th Fighter Squadron engaged a formation of 10 Bf-109s and 12 Mach-E C-202s single-handedly after becoming separated from his squadron. In 12 minutes of combat, Leverett destroyed 5 Bf-109s. His gun camera footage, analyzed by technical intelligence officers, showed each kill resulting from a burst duration of less than 3 seconds. The concentrated firepower meant even glancing hits often proved fatal. They dominated the airspace over Italy by autumn 1943. The 14th Fighter Group, flying from Triolo Airfield in southern Italy, escorted B-24 formations to targets throughout the Italian peninsula. On October 1st, during a raid on the Messerschmitt production facility at Regensburg, P-38H models of the 14th Fighter Group encountered 50 Bf-109 G6s and FW-190 A5s. The battle sprawled across 40 miles of sky from 28,000 feet down to the deck. American pilots reported that German fighters seemed reluctant to engage head-on, a tactical development that would become increasingly common. Luftwaffe pilots had learned through bitter experience that the P-38's nose-mounted armament made frontal attacks suicidal. A Messerschmitt's wing-mounted guns created a cone of fire that dispersed significantly with range. At 400 meters, considered close-in fighting distance, a Bf-109G's rounds might spread across a circle 15 feet in diameter. The P-38's weapons at the same range created a pattern barely 4 feet across. Deflection shooting, the art of leading a target to account for relative motion, became far less critical when every round traveled in a parallel stream. From November 1942 through December 1943, P-38 units in the Mediterranean theater claimed 608 Axis aircraft destroyed in aerial combat while losing 131 of their own, a kill ratio of 4.6 to 1. More tellingly, mission success rates for bomber formations escorted by P-38s exceeded 90%, compared to 76% for formations escorted by other fighter types. The Lightning's range, 1,300 miles with drop tanks, meant it could escort bombers to targets deep in enemy territory and still retain sufficient fuel for extended combat. German pilots began referring to the P-38 as der Gabelschwanz-Teufel with increasing frequency. The nickname appeared in Luftwaffe unit diaries, combat reports, and pilot letters home. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, a Bf-109 ace with 28 victories, wrote in his diary on December 3, 1943, "Encountered fork-tailed devils over Bologna. Their shooting is devastatingly accurate. We must attack from above and behind only. Frontal engagement is death." But the Lightning's advantage depended entirely on one critical factor: altitude. Above 25,000 feet, its turbocharged engines provided power that German fighters couldn't match. Below 15,000 feet, the picture changed dramatically. By mid-1943, the tactical picture began shifting as Luftwaffe pilots adapted to the P-38's strengths and identified its vulnerabilities. June 12, 1943, over Palermo, Sicily, 1435. Captain Robert Schaefer of the 94th Fighter Squadron led 8 P-38Gs on a fighter sweep at 18,000 feet when 12 FW-190 A5s of Jagdgeschwader II doved from 28,000 feet. The German pilots, following new tactical directives developed specifically for engaging the fork-tailed devil, initiated combat with a single diving pass, then immediately descended to low altitude rather than attempting to climb back for another attack. The P-38s followed, as the German pilots knew they would. Between 15,000 and 10,000 feet, the Lightning's advantages evaporated. The FW-190's BMW 801D engine, a massive 2,000 horsepower radial, didn't rely on turbo-superchargers. At low altitude, the German fighter could outturn, outroll, and out-accelerate the heavier American aircraft. The engagement became a swirling knife fight, where the P-38's concentrated firepower meant nothing if the pilot couldn't bring his nose to bear. Schaefer's flight lost 3 aircraft in 7 minutes. All 3 pilots survived. The P-38 structure proved remarkably resilient, but the tactical lesson was clear. The fork-tailed devil was not invincible. Force it to fight where it was weakest, and even its devastating armament became irrelevant. Luftwaffe intelligence officers compiled a comprehensive tactical analysis of the P-38 by August 1943. Major Heinz Baer, who commanded Jagdgeschwader 77, received a copy of the assessment on August 19. The document, stamped Geheim, secret, opened with a grudging acknowledgement. The Lockheed P-38 represents the most formidable American fighter currently in service over the European theater. The analysis detailed specific vulnerabilities. The P-38's high-altitude performance stemmed from General Electric B-2 turbo-superchargers mounted in each engine boom. These complex devices maintained manifold pressure as air density decreased, feeding the Allison engines the oxygen they needed at altitude. But turbo-superchargers added 350 pounds per side. Combined with the aircraft's twin-engine configuration and heavy armament, this created a fighter that weighed 14,100 pounds empty, nearly 2,000 pounds heavier than a Bf-109 G6. That weight penalty manifested in reduced maneuverability, especially at low altitude where the turbo-superchargers provided no advantage. The P-38's roll rate, 98 degrees per second at 300 miles per hour, couldn't match the FW-190's stunning 150 degrees per second. In a turning fight below 10,000 feet, a competent German pilot in either a Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf could outturn the Lightning consistently. The aircraft also suffered from compressibility issues in high-speed dives. Above 350 miles per hour in a steep dive, the P-38's controls locked up as shock waves formed over the wing and tail surfaces. Pilots reported the aircraft becoming nearly uncontrollable, nose-heavy, and impossible to pull out of the dive until reaching denser air at lower altitude. Several P-38s had been lost when pilots, diving to escape enemy fighters, couldn't recover before impacting the ground. Lieutenant Hans-Joachim Marseille, the legendary Star of Africa, encountered P-38s twice before his death in September 1942. His combat report from August 31st noted, "American twin-boom fighter observed. Avoided frontal engagement. Attacked from 6 o'clock high, maintaining energy advantage. Enemy aircraft's concentrated firepower is extremely dangerous, but tactical employment shows lack of experience. Maintain altitude advantage and dictate terms of engagement." By late 1943, every Luftwaffe fighter pilot in the Mediterranean and European theaters had been briefed on P-38 engagement tactics. Attack from above. Dive, engage, extend away. Never attempt to climb with them above 20,000 feet. Never engage head-on. Force them to low altitude, where weight and compressibility become disadvantages. The tactical adjustments reduced P-38 effectiveness measurably. Kill ratios in the final months of 1943 declined from 4.61 to 2.81. American pilots found themselves increasingly drawn into low-altitude turning fights where their advantages disappeared. The Lightning was still dangerous, its firepower remained devastating when brought to bear, but German pilots had learned to avoid situations where that firepower could be effectively employed. Yet the P-38's reputation continued growing, fueled by specific incidents that demonstrated its lethality even as overall effectiveness declined. The aircraft's longest-range capability led to its employment in specialized missions where its unique characteristics proved ideal, missions that would cement its fearsome reputation in Luftwaffe consciousness forever. The P-38's unusual configuration and the concentrated armament it enabled resulted from a design philosophy fundamentally different from European approaches to fighter development. February 1937. When the Army Air Corps issued Circular Proposal X608, European fighter design had reached a consensus: single-engine, wing-mounted guns, maximum agility. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, Supermarine Spitfire, and Hawker Hurricane all followed this template. Kelly Johnson examined these specifications and recognized they represented evolutionary thinking, incremental improvements on existing concepts. The Air Corps requirements demanded revolution, not evolution. Range, 1,000 miles. Speed, 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. Altitude, effective combat capability above 25,000 feet. Armament, superior to any existing American fighter. These specifications could not be met by scaling up a conventional single-engine design. Johnson's team at Lockheed's Advanced Development Projects Office, the organization that would later be nicknamed Skunk Works, approached the problem systematically. First requirement, long range demanded large fuel capacity. Second requirement, high altitude performance required turbo superchargers. Third requirement, heavy armament needed structural support and ammunition storage. Fourth requirement, high speed demanded reduced drag. The mathematics were brutally simple. A conventional single-engine fighter with wing-mounted guns attempting to meet these requirements would need a massive wing, creating drag that eliminated the speed advantage. Mounting turbo superchargers in a single fuselage created cooling problems and center of gravity issues. The requirements existed in direct opposition using conventional architecture. Johnson made the defining choice: twin engines. Not side by side like the Messerschmitt WF-110, but separated into booms that extended aft from the wings. This radical configuration solved multiple problems simultaneously. Each Allison V1710-27 engine generated 1,150 horsepower. Combined output, 2,300 horsepower, more than any single-engine fighter. The engines sat outboard, their weight spanning the wing, improving roll stability. The turbo superchargers fit naturally into the booms, with ample room for cooling air ducting. Most critically, the twin-boom layout created a short central nacelle housing the cockpit, and an unprecedented weapon installation. Johnson specified 4.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns stacked in the nose above a single 20mm Hispano M2 cannon. Total weight of fire, 3,200 grams per second. But weight alone didn't capture the advantage. Traditional fighter armament mounted guns in the wings, separated by the fuselage width. A Bf-109 G6, for example, carried one 20mm MG151/20 cannon firing through the propeller hub and two 13mm MG131 machine guns in the cowling above the engine. These weapons aimed at slightly converging angles, their rounds intersecting at a predetermined harmonization range, typically 300 meters. Fire within that convergence zone, and all three weapons concentrated their fire on a small area. Fire at any other range, and the rounds diverged, reducing hit probability. British fighters faced even worse challenges. The Supermarine Spitfire Mk5 carried 8.303 caliber Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing. These weapons had to be harmonized to intersect at a specific distance. RAF doctrine initially specified 400 yards, later reduced to 250 yards as combat experience showed closer ranges were more effective. But harmonization was never perfect. Rounds from the wing-mounted guns always followed slightly diverging paths, creating a cone of fire that expanded with range. The P-38's nose-mounted armament eliminated convergence entirely. All 5 weapons fired perfectly parallel streams. A pilot aiming at a target 200 meters away or 1,000 meters away dealt with identical ballistics. The cone of fire, determined solely by weapon spacing in the nose, remained lethally concentrated at any combat range. Technical analysis showed the P-38's bullet pattern at 600 meters measured approximately 4.2 feet in diameter. A Bf-109G's pattern at the same range, even within its optimal convergence zone, measured nearly 12 feet across. This represented a fundamental difference in gunnery philosophy. European fighters required pilots to judge range precisely and maneuver to place the target within the optimal convergence zone. The P-38's pilot simply placed the target anywhere in his gun sight's field of view and fired. Every bullet flew true. The decision carried penalties. The nose armament added weight in the worst possible location, forward of the center of gravity. This contributed to the P-38's compressibility problems in high-speed dives. The twin-engine configuration added 2,800 pounds compared to a single-engine fighter. This weight reduced maneuverability and required more robust landing gear, further increasing weight. The P-38F, fully loaded for combat, weighed 17,500 pounds. A contemporary Bf-109 G2 weighed 6,940 pounds. But Johnson's design team believed the trade-offs were justified. American strategic doctrine emphasized bomber escort and long-range operations. The P-38 could fly 1,300 miles with drop tanks, far enough to escort B-17s to targets deep in Germany and return home. The concentrated firepower meant shorter engagement times, conserving ammunition, and reducing vulnerability during attack runs. The twin engines provided redundancy. Dozens of P-38 pilots returned safely on one engine after combat damage or mechanical failure. The Lightning represented a distinctly American approach to fighter design. Accept increased complexity and weight in exchange for capability, survivability, and operational flexibility. German fighters prioritized agility and climb rate, accepting limited range and lighter armament. The P-38 prioritized firepower and range, accepting reduced maneuverability and increased mechanical complexity. In the high-altitude bomber escort role for which it was designed, these trade-offs proved exactly correct. The P-38's concentrated firepower and long range made it ideal for specialized missions where its unique capabilities outweighed its tactical limitations. These missions, particularly one flown on April 18, 1943, cemented its reputation as the fork-tailed devil in Luftwaffe consciousness. April 18, 1943, Bougainville, Solomon Islands. 16 P-38G Lightnings of the 339th Fighter Squadron departed Henderson Field on Guadalcanal at 0710 for a mission unlike any previously attempted in the Pacific Theater. Their target? Admiral Iamoto Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, flying in a Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber approximately 435 miles away. The P-38 was the only American fighter with sufficient range to reach the intercept point, engage, and return. The mission, codenamed Operation Vengeance, demonstrated the Lightning's capabilities at their absolute peak. Flying at wave-top level to avoid radar detection, the formation arrived at the intercept point at 0934, within 60 seconds of the planned time after a 435-mile flight over open ocean. Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber engaged the 2 Betty bombers and 6 escorting Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. Lanphier's P-38 destroyed 1 Betty, confirmed as Yamamoto's transport, in a 3-second burst from 150 yards. The Admiral's aircraft broke apart and crashed into the jungle. Barber destroyed the 2nd Betty. Both P-38s returned safely, having flown 870 miles total. The mission's success resonated far beyond killing a single high-value target. It demonstrated that the P-38 could execute precision strikes at extreme range, a capability no other fighter possessed. German intelligence officers analyzed the mission extensively. The implications were disturbing. If American fighters could reach targets 400-plus miles from their bases with sufficient fuel to engage in combat and return, no German commander was safe anywhere within that radius of Allied airfields. The Lightning's effectiveness in the European theater manifested most devastatingly during bomber escort missions throughout 1944. March 4, 1944. The first American fighter escort reached Berlin. 68 P-38Hs from the 55th Fighter Group, flying from bases in England, accompanied B-17s attacking German factories. The round-trip distance, 1,200 miles. The P-38s engaged Bf-109s and Fw-190s over the target, claimed 8 destroyed for 2 losses and returned home. No other Allied fighter in early 1944 could accomplish this mission. April 24, 1944. Major William Leverett, already an ace from Mediterranean combat, led the 37th Fighter Squadron on a bomber escort to Wiener Neustadt, Austria. His flight of 8 P-38J models encountered 30 Bf-109G6s attacking the B-24 formation. The engagement sprawled across 10 minutes. Leverett's combat report noted, "Closed with 3 enemy aircraft head-on at 26,000 feet. First burst, 2 seconds, target disintegrated. Second target, 1 second burst, immediate fire and explosion. Third target attempted to break away. 3-second burst from 400 yards, wings separated from fuselage." The clinical efficiency of these engagements, kills achieved with burst durations of 1 to 3 seconds, appeared repeatedly in P-38 combat reports. The concentrated nose armament meant every round counted. Luftwaffe pilots, accustomed to longer burst requirements from their wing-mounted guns, found the P-38's gunnery effectiveness shocking. A Bf-109G pilot might fire 60-80 rounds to achieve a kill. A P-38 pilot, with all 5 weapons firing simultaneously, needed 15-20 rounds total, a 2-second burst. May 8, 1944, over Brunswick, Germany. The 20th Fighter Group intercepted a formation of FW-190A8s attacking a B-17 group. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Rau engaged 6 German fighters sequentially, destroying 5 in 4 minutes of combat. His gun camera footage, preserved in the National Archives, shows the devastating effect of concentrated firepower. A Bf-109G pilot might fire 60-80 rounds to achieve a kill. A P-38 pilot, with all 5 weapons firing simultaneously, needed 15-20 rounds total, a 2-second burst. May 8, 1944, over Brunswick, Germany. The 20th Fighter Group intercepted a formation of FW-190A8s attacking a B-17 group. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Rau engaged 6 German fighters sequentially, destroying 5 in 4 minutes of combat. His gun camera footage, preserved in the National Archives, shows the devastating effect of concentrated firepower. Each engagement follows an identical pattern. Rau maneuvers into firing position, fires a brief burst, and the target aircraft erupts in flames or breaks apart structurally. Total ammunition expended: 280 rounds of 50 caliber and 35 rounds of 20 mm, less than 20% of his total load. The P-38's effectiveness exacted a psychological toll on Luftwaffe pilots as severe as the physical losses. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, flying Bf-109G6s with Jagdgeschwader 11, wrote in his diary on June 15, 1944, "The American twin-boom fighters are everywhere. They fly higher than we can reach them, faster than we can catch them, and their firepower is devastating. To attack the bombers, we must first survive the escorts. More and more, we cannot." Luftwaffe attempts to counter the P-38 threat through tactical adaptation achieved limited success. July 7, 1944. Jagdgeschwader 3 attempted a mass coordinated attack on a P-38 escorted bomber formation near Leipzig. 40 Bf-109G14s and FW-190A8s executed a precisely timed assault from multiple directions simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm the 32 P-38J escorts through numerical superiority. The plan collapsed within minutes. The Lightning pilots, using superior altitude performance, dove into the German formations, breaking up the coordinated attack. The engagement cost Jagdgeschwader 3 17 aircraft. The P-38 group lost 4 fighters. Not a single B-17 was destroyed. By late 1944, the fork-tailed devil's reputation had become a weapon itself. Luftwaffe pilots radioed warnings when P-38s appeared, sometimes breaking off attacks on bomber formations rather than engage the escorts. This psychological impact, the mere presence of P-38's deterring attacks, proved as valuable as actual combat victories. December 23, 1944. During the Battle of the Bulge, P-38L models provided close air support for surrounded American forces near Bastogne. The aircraft's concentrated armament proved as devastating against ground targets as aerial opponents. Major George Preddy, leading the 328th Fighter Squadron, strafed German armored columns, his guns destroying 4 tanks and 6 half-tracks in a single pass. Preddy would be credited with 26.83 aerial victories before his death on December 25, making him the top-scoring P-38 ace in the European theater. The Lightning's combat record in Europe from late 1943 through May 1945 documented its deadly effectiveness. 2,520 aerial victories claimed by P-38 units, against 1,758 P-38s lost to all causes: combat, accidents, mechanical failure. But these numbers obscured a more important statistic. Bomber formations escorted by P-38s suffered loss rates 40% lower than formations escorted by other fighter types during the same period. The Lightning's long range meant it could provide protection throughout the entire mission, flying with the bombers from takeoff to landing. The United States Army Air Forces accepted 10,037 P-38 Lightnings between 1941 and 1945. Representing one of the largest single-type fighter production runs of the war. The first production variant, the P-38D, entered service in August 1941 with 69 aircraft built. These featured the basic configuration: twin 1,150 horsepower Allison V1710-27 engines, 4.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns with 500 rounds per gun, one 20mm Hispano M2 cannon with 150 rounds. Maximum speed, 390 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Service ceiling, 39,000 feet. Range, 650 miles internal fuel. The P-38E, first production model with the full-nose armament package, totaled 210 aircraft. The P-38F, introduced in March 1942, featured improved engines and underwing hardpoints for 2,000 pounds of bombs or drop tanks, extending range to 1,300 miles. Production, 527 aircraft. The definitive combat variant, the P-38J, entered service in August 1943. Lockheed manufactured 2,970 P-38J models, featuring 1,425 horsepower Allison V1710-8991 engines, increased fuel capacity, and improved cockpit heating. Maximum speed increased to 414 miles per hour. The P-38J became the most numerous Lightning variant, equipping the majority of squadrons in both European and Pacific theaters during 1944-45. The final production model, the P-38L, incorporated all combat modifications and lessons learned. Power increased to 1,475 horsepower per engine, with war emergency settings allowing brief operation at 1,600 horsepower. Lockheed built 3,923 P-38L models before production ended in August 1945. These aircraft could achieve 443 miles per hour at 25,000 feet with war emergency power engaged. Combat losses varied significantly by theater. In the European theater, P-38 units lost 1,758 aircraft to all causes from November 1942 through May 1945. Of these, 842 were attributed to enemy fighters, 376 to anti-aircraft fire, and 540 to operational causes: weather, mechanical failure, accidents. The loss rate, approximately 1.4% per mission, compared favorably to other American fighter types operating in the same theater during the same period. Pacific theater losses totaled 1,396 aircraft. The distribution differed significantly: 456 to enemy fighters, 287 to anti-aircraft fire, and 653 to operational causes: weather, mechanical failure, accidents. The higher operational loss rate reflected the Pacific's hostile operating environment, long overwater flights, primitive forward airfields, and limited maintenance infrastructure. Crew casualties proved remarkably low relative to sorties flown. The P-38's twin-engine configuration provided redundancy that saved hundreds of pilots. Combat reports documented 1,328 instances of P-38 pilots returning to base on one engine after combat damage or mechanical failure. The survival rate for pilots flying heavily damaged P-38s exceeded 70%, significantly higher than single-engine fighters, where engine failure or fire typically resulted in aircraft loss and frequent pilot death. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Jenkins, who flew 106 combat missions in P-38s with the 55th Fighter Group, survived 3 instances of catastrophic combat damage. The first time, a 20mm cannon shell destroyed my left engine over Hamburg. Flew 240 miles home on the right engine. Second time, flak knocked out my right engine over Berlin. Flew home on the left. Third time, both engines were hit but kept running long enough to reach friendly territory. In a single-engine fighter, any one of those hits would have killed me. The P-38 brought me home every time. American fighter design philosophy prioritized crew survivability through redundancy, armor protection, and self-sealing fuel tanks. A P-38J carried 212 pounds of armor plate, protecting the pilot from below and behind. Each fuel tank featured a thick rubber lining that automatically sealed punctures up to .50 caliber. These protection systems added 420 pounds compared to an unprotected aircraft, weight that directly reduced performance but dramatically increased pilot survival rates. German fighters made different choices. The Messerschmitt Bf-109G carried minimal armor protection, 85 pounds of plate behind the pilot's head and back. Fuel tanks in early models lacked self-sealing protection entirely. Later models added minimal protection that proved inadequate against incendiary ammunition. Total weight penalty for survival features 127 pounds. This kept the aircraft light and maneuverable and left pilots vulnerable. The philosophical difference manifested in stark statistics. German fighter pilot casualty rates in 1944-45 averaged 37% killed or severely wounded per 6-month operational period. American fighter pilot casualty rates for the same period averaged 12%. The Americans accepted reduced maneuverability in exchange for survivability. The Germans prioritized performance over protection. The mathematics were brutal. A dead German ace in a superior performing aircraft contributed nothing to the war effort. An American pilot who survived being shot down returned to combat after replacement aircraft arrived. By May 1945, the P-38 Lightning had claimed approximately 3,700 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, more than any other American fighter type in the European theater, though the P-51 Mustang's late-war dominance would eventually surpass this total. The fork-tailed Devil had achieved exactly what Kelly Johnson designed it to accomplish: long-range bomber escort with devastating firepower and sufficient survivability to bring American pilots home alive. August 14, 1945. Recklinck-Lürz Airfield, Germany. Oberst Werner Streib walked back to his office from the captured P-38 sitting on the concrete apron. The war in Europe had been over for 3 months. The war in the Pacific would end in hours. Japan's surrender imminent after atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The technical intelligence reports Streib had compiled over 3 years sat in folders on his desk, awaiting Allied intelligence officers who would arrive to examine German aviation research. His final assessment of the P-38 Lightning ran to 47 pages. The conclusion remained unchanged from his initial observation in August 1943. The Lockheed P-38 represents a fundamental challenge to conventional fighter design philosophy. Its twin-boom configuration, initially perceived as a liability, proved to be the source of its greatest advantage: concentrated nose-mounted armament that eliminated gun convergence requirements. German fighter tactics adapted to exploit the aircraft's weaknesses at low altitude and in high-speed maneuvering. These adaptations achieved limited success. The P-38's primary mission, long-range bomber escort, played to its strengths while minimizing its weaknesses. In this role, the aircraft proved devastatingly effective. The final irony was inescapable. The aircraft that German pilots called der Gabelschwanz-Teufel, mocked for its strange appearance, feared for its concentrated firepower, had helped accomplish exactly what American strategic planners intended. It had escorted bombers deep into the Reich, protected them with overwhelming firepower, and returned American aircrews safely to base at rates German fighters could not match. The fork-tailed devil looked wrong, it seemed wrong, but it worked precisely as designed. The lesson extended far beyond a single aircraft type. The P-38 demonstrated that unconventional solutions to complex problems often succeed specifically because they reject established patterns. Kelly Johnson's team chose to ignore European fighter design consensus, single-engine, wing-mounted guns, maximum agility, and created something entirely different. That difference became the weapon. Military history repeatedly validates this principle. The innovations that reshape warfare rarely emerge from incremental improvements to existing designs. They come from fundamental reimagining of requirements, acceptance of trade-offs that seem counterintuitive, and willingness to look strange in pursuit of effectiveness. The P-38 looked strange. German pilots laughed at its twin-boom configuration until those same pilots were dying in the concentrated streams of fire pouring from that ungainly nose. Strybe's final paragraph captured the broader truth. The Americans designed the P-38 to accomplish specific missions: long-range escort, high-altitude interception, and ground attack with heavy firepower. They accepted increased weight, complexity, and reduced maneuverability to achieve these goals. The aircraft succeeded brilliantly at its intended missions while remaining vulnerable in tactical situations for which it was never designed. This represents coherent design philosophy: optimize for primary mission requirements, accept limitations elsewhere. German fighter development during the same period attempted to create aircraft that excelled at all missions simultaneously. We achieved excellence at none. The examination of the captured P-38 at Rechlin-Lerz provided the final confirmation of what Luftwaffe pilots had learned through bitter experience across 3 years of combat. The fork-tailed devil was not poorly designed. It was brilliantly designed to achieve specific strategic goals. Those goals centered on protecting American bombers and bringing American pilots home alive. And in that mission, the strange twin-boom fighter with its devastatingly concentrated nose armament succeeded completely. The aircraft's unusual design was not a flaw to be overcome. It was the innovation that made everything else possible. And in that single fact lies the entire story of why American industrial and engineering philosophy, accepting complexity and weight to achieve capability and survivability, ultimately prevailed over German emphasis on performance and agility at the expense of pilot protection. The fork-tailed devil earned its fearsome nickname not despite its strange appearance, but because of what that appearance enabled. Innovation often looks wrong at first glance. The test is not whether it conforms to expectations, but whether it achieves its mission. By that measure, Kelly Johnson's unconventional twin-boom fighter proved devastatingly, irrefutably right.